In our previous videos, we have created a web application where we can upload an image, and then we can resize that image, we can watermark that image, and we can take information about the image and put it on an ActiveMQ queue. So we're producing onto the queue. In this video, we're going to make a simple program that reads off of that queue, and if we want, we can eventually have it resize and watermark the image as well. Now, I'm going to make a ridiculously simple new program. So we'll say File, New, and then we're going to say we just want a simple Java project. So we'll go to Project, and Java project is fine. And we will call this one maybe a post processor. So maybe an image post processor. Everything else looks good. Next, we'll make one main class with a runnable. This all looks fine. The idea is that we are using a completely different program to read off the queue than we have putting on the queue. So I'm going to right click on this guy, and I'm going to convert it to a Maven project so that I can use the dependencies that we've already created. This all looks good. The dependencies that we've already created for our ActiveMQ and also for the image editing. Okay, so I'm going to run to our plant places, and I'm going to grab its POM, and I'm going to grab those last few entries that we have, the netQBird, I guess is how you say that, and also the ActiveMQ. Go ahead and grab those two, Control-C. And now I'm going to go up to our image post processor, go into this POM, and the one dependency. Looks like we're going to need dependency as well. Just a moment. Okay, so dependencies, dependency. Okay, so we'll say dependencies. Let that close, and then in between these two, paste our dependency for both the image editor and also for ActiveMQ. Now I'll right-click, and I'll say Maven Update to grab those dependencies. Okay, and okay, we'll let that run. Okay, now in source, I'll go ahead and say new, and then we'll say class, and I'm going to call this one image processor. Remember, the idea here is that we put something onto a queue so that a different program can pick up off of that queue and do some long-running processes. No need for a superclass here, but I am going to put a package com.plantplaces.process, and I think everything else looks good, and finish. Okay, we'll start this one from the command line, so we'll make a public static void main string, args, and we'll simply say image processor IP equals new image processor. Okay. And we're going to have this fire up a new thread. So I'm going to say public class image processor implements runnable. And that's going to mean that we need to create a run method. So Control-1, add unimplemented methods. And the run method is what will run in the new thread. Now, actually, because of that, I'm going to change the type here from image processor to the interface type runnable. And then I'm going to say thread T equals new thread IP, and then T.start. So I'll put some comments to this effect that say create an instance of the object and run it in a new thread. You don't have to use threads with queues, but it is very common that you're going to use queues in a multi-threaded process. So it makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm going to run back to I'm going to borrow some things from our class that is adding on to the queue because there's a lot I can reuse from that. So we call that JMS bean. And it's going to have a lot of these. Let me Control-M so we can see this in high def. It's going to have a lot of these same details in our consumer. We're going to need a connection, a session, and a queue. So I'm going to Control-C, and I'll go to our run method and Control-V, paste those there. and JMS connection factory create connection. We're going to need to set that up in Spring. Or since this is a, honestly, since this is a quick and dirty, we can do it without Spring. So let me go ahead and grab this information here. ActiveMQ connection factory. So I'm going to say ActiveMQ connection factory. JMS connection factory equals new ActiveMQ connection factory, and then we'll pass as a constructor argument. We're going to pass the location of our ActiveMQ queue, which is this right here, localhost 6161, the default port for an ActiveMQ factory. So let me go ahead and pass that in as a string. There we go. Control-Shift-O to organize imports, and we'll say ActiveMQ connection factory, and looks pretty good. Okay, what do we not like here? We have some exceptions. I'm going to surround with try-catch. Okay, I'm going to put the whole thing in a try-catch block. And just tidy things up a little bit. Okay. And I think we have what we need there, and save. Okay, so at this point we have our IP address of our ActiveMQ instance. We're connecting to it, we're opening up a session, and then we are attaching to the queue called Photos, and this is the same queue that we're using to publish onto. So in this case we're consuming off of, and the web application we're publishing onto. Now, the difference between producing onto a queue and consuming off of a queue is quite simple. Here we're saying create producer when we're publishing onto the queue. To read off of the queue, we're simply going to say create consumer. So I'm going to say session.create consumer and destination, that'll work. The destination is going to be our queue called photo queue in this case. Okay. And then Control-1 to assign this to a new variable. Okay, and we'll simply call it consumer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an infinite loop that listens for messages. So that's why we like to do this in a separate thread, so that we can have kind of an infinite loop here that is going to be continuously listening for messages because it never knows when it's going to receive one. So we'll simply say while true, and then we're going to say consumer.receive. Okay, and that's going to return back a message to us. So Control-1, and we'll say assign to new local variable message receive. Now we can cheat a little bit here because we know that we're putting a text message on the queue, so we know we're going to get a text message back off the queue. So I'm going to change this instead of message. I'm going to change it to text message, and I'm going to cast then what we receive back. I'm going to cast that to text message. Consumer receive. Control-Shift-O to organize imports. And now we're going to say, let me change this to message instead of receive. That sounds a little bit better. Okay, and then I'm going to say message.toString. Okay, and we will save that in a string. String payload equals message receive. Now we're going to do our photo processing here. And so I don't want to do that until I've confirmed that I am able to read off of the queues. So I'm just going to put a dummy line here, int I equals 1 + 1. That way we can set a breakpoint and we can walk down and watch this actually receive items off the queue. Now again, very simple, quick and dirty Java program. We started with the main method. We're going to start it as a thread, so it starts in its own separate thread. It's going to do the initialization once, and then it's going to go through this endless loop. In theory, we might want a way to break out of this loop. So what I am going to do is I'm going to close off the queue. I'm going to say connection.stop. But really, we're probably not going to get there. This guy's probably just going to keep running in the background unless at some point we want to break out of this loop. Maybe we get an exception or something like that. Okay, as a matter of fact, it tells me it's unreachable. So I could refactor a bit, but we'll ignore this for the instance. What I would probably do is declare the connection outside the try. Well, let's go ahead and do that because I'm going to feel jittery if I don't. So connection, let's declare that up here before the try block. And then we're not going to be declaring it again. We're going to be assigning it. And then after the catch, I'll just put an if connection is not null. Then we'll say connection dot stop. Clean things up a little bit. Okay, what don't you like there? Okay, connection equals, we'll have to initialize it to nothing, so we'll just initialize it to null, and hopefully that will take care of things. Okay, surround with try catch. I would put a log statement in here. At this point, if we can't stop it, it's not worth worrying about. We're probably shutting down anyway. So in the catch block, I would probably put a null. Anyway, I have a couple breakpoints. I'm going to save this. Now, because this is a simple Java program, we don't have to go through adding it to a server or anything like that. All I need to do is just tell it to debug. So we'll say debug as Java application, and it will come up in the debugger just like anything else. And then we'll see if it can read off the queue. And it immediately starts debugging. Let's verify that it's able to connect to our ActiveMQ instance. So far looking pretty good, which makes me happy. And now we're going to run into the while. Now this receive will only fire when we actually add something to the queue. If memory serves right, we might already have some messages on the queue from our last iteration, and it looks like we do. And we see number of pending messages 1, number of consumers, which is what we just wrote, 1. So right now it sees that it is grabbing an item off of the queue. Okay, so we go back and let's see if it's able to find this item. It is. That's, again, good news. So let's take a look at message, ActiveMQ text message, and what do we have on here? A whole lot of information. And if we take a look, finally, text is the location, the path of the image that we put onto the queue. So I don't know if the toString is going to give us exactly what we want. We might have to say get text. If I look at payload now, yeah, it's a whole bunch of information. So, but that's okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and step over again, and we're going to see that it's going to wait. Notice that I hit the step over here, and the debugger is currently waiting. It's waiting for a message to go onto the queue. It's going to sit here, and it's going to be blocked until something is on the queue. That's the nice thing about queue reading, is it only sits there and works when it has something to do. Otherwise, it goes into the block state, and when a thread is blocked, it's not consuming CPU resources. Well, I know I need to make a little fix here anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this program, and I'm going to say, instead of messages toString, I'm going to say message.getText. Okay. Oops, a little too much there, and save. Let's go back and refresh our ActiveMQ. And notice the number of pending messages is now down to 0 because we have consumed that item off of the queue. And again, that's the value of queues. It gives us guaranteed delivery many times from one program to another. And I'll say this, in this day and age, that's very important. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I started as a programmer, this kind of interaction is something we didn't have with programs. If you had to interact with two different programs, oftentimes you would write a file from one program, the other program would read the file later. Maybe the common thread would be a database. But most of the time, programs really didn't interact well. A lot of times it wasn't official. With queues, it's nice because it gives you an official bridge from one program to another. So I think we're in pretty good shape now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run back and I'm going to remove the photo processing from our web application, and I'm going to move it over to this new post-processing application that we're writing now. So just a moment, plant service, And of course, the idea here is that this is pretty heavy processing that we're doing. So I'm going to say, let's see, thumbnail directory, thumbnail file, unique image name, like so, photo set URI. I think we're good there. I'll tell you what, we'll start just with the watermark. We just want to demonstrate the concept, so we'll start just by doing the watermark. We'll leave the thumbnail for later because for that we actually have to create a new file. So let's grab the watermark logic, save. Okay, I'll go ahead and terminate that thread. And just a moment. And we'll go back to our image processor. Now, I'll say this isn't very efficient because we're not reusing a lot of stuff. We've hard-coded stuff, but again, we're just going for a very simple way to consume from a message reader. Okay, we need to make a file, so I'm going to say file equals new file, and the file is going to be that payload that we're getting off of the thread, off of the queue rather. File equals new file. Okay. Watermark, okay, we need this directory. I'm going to go borrow that from our plant service as well. Let's find our directory. Okay, copy and put into our image processor. Okay, and save. And so far, I think we look pretty good. So we're notice that it has automatically grabbed the thumbnail later class because we had that in our POM file. So I'll put a few comments here. Okay, create a file that represents the image that was uploaded. Okay, and then we'll say the directory where the watermark exists. Okay, get the watermark. Okay, and then finally use thumbnailator to add the watermark to the image and save. Okay, I'm going to need to restart both this process and also the web process, the website, so I'll pause while I restart these. Now I'm going to start these in a specified order. This is our image post-processor. The reason I want to show you this is note that the debug line is on line 41. I'm going to choose continue, note where my mouse is now, and it's going to block as it waits for a message to come onto the queue. So notice that it doesn't just automatically go to line 42. It's blocked because it's waiting for a message from the queue. Now with this started, I'm going to go ahead and start the server as well. You can certainly debug multiple applications in Eclipse at the same time, which is a feature we're going to use here. Now I'm going to grab an image from Plant Places. This obviously I need to rotate this image, but this is from the High Line in Manhattan. So we're going to call this High Line and save. And now I'm going to go to our application, and I'll need to just start fresh here, just a moment, and let's upload it. So date taken, I took this one back in March of 2015, if I recall correctly, March or April, sometime around then. Okay, we'll put my name as contributor and choose file, and that was the High Line. So we're going to grab High Line, open, and submit, and let's watch what happens. First, the breakpoint is going to hit on our web service. Notice, I'm going to collapse this just a moment. Notice that you see two different applications running here, the image processor and also Tomcat. The image processor we know is purely self-contained, and as I mentioned, we can run two at the same time, no problem with that. It's very easy to see here because we're going to watch the interaction between the two. Okay, so generate the image name. Okay, put the image name on the queue, put the full file path on the queue. Okay, and here we go. So this is our producer and our web application putting it onto the queue. Now one thing I just thought about, did I actually save the image yet? Yes, I did. I was going to say we want to make sure we do that in the right order, that we save the image to disk before we put it on the queue and have the post-processor fire. If we don't do that in the right sequence, the post-processor is going to find out it has nothing to do. Now this is going to create the thumbnail, but as a matter of fact, I'm going to bet you, because we've put it on the queue, that we can just hold right here on our web application and we can watch it process on the queue. Sure enough, notice the green line has now gone to line 42 because our application has just received the information about this image. So I'm going to step forward and we're going to take a look at this payload. Hopefully I save this in a way that it can be parsed into a file. It looks like it, but we won't know until we actually try. So parse it into a file. Okay, get our watermark. Okay, remember we're not doing watermarking in the web application anymore. Okay, grab the watermark that we're going to apply. Use Thumbnailator to apply the watermark. And then when that's done, it goes back up and it tries the loop again. Okay, step again, wait for the next message. Let's see if this watermark applied. And remember, I have not continued with even making the thumbnail yet. Our web application is still waiting for me to press play on that. Let's see if our watermark has applied. So I'm going to jump back to Java EE view. I'm going to go to our plant places and our resources image directory, resources, and then images. I'll just hit a refresh on this one. And we know that we use a timestamp to give it uniqueness, and I'm doing this on November 1st. So I'm going to look for hopefully a November 1st here. And there we go. Here's our November 1st. Let's double click, and if all works well, it's hard. That's interesting. It right-sized it. It's a little tricky to see because it's down here in the dark, but let me go ahead and expand this image and pan down. And sure enough, you see that our post-processor using a queue has applied the watermark to the image right there. Copyright 2015, plantplaces.com. Again, I know it's a little hard to see. I didn't realize, I thought it was actually going to come over here the way I did this, but sure enough, it has applied the watermark in a separate thread. So the next thing we could do is we could move that thumbnail that creates the 100 by 100, but I'll go ahead and play through this. I think you see the idea. What we could do is we could make that thumbnail a different process which also reads from the queue, but in that case, we'd actually use a topic, because a topic has perhaps one producer, but multiple consumers. So that's the difference between a topic and a queue. A queue is one producer, one consumer. A topic is one producer, multiple consumers. And that's what we'll take a look at in our next video. Thank you.